Okay, get this. What if the sharpest, most relevant take on our completely divided, super-connected world wasn't written last week, but over 100 years ago? Sounds wild, right? Well, that's what we're diving into. The absolutely brilliant and kind of startlingly modern ideas of a classicist named Jane Ellen Harrison. And her big idea? It boils down to two things that might just save us all: heresy and connection.
So we're drawing from her book, a collection of essays called Alpha and Omega. And the timing is just wow. She got the proofs for this book right at the start of World War I. And she was actually worried, you know? She thought that in the middle of this giant, terrible war, her ideas would just look like, well, faded photographs, old news. But honestly, as you're about to see, they've done the exact opposite. They've only gotten sharper.
And this is a great place to start. In the foreword to a new edition of the book, Maria Popova just nails the core idea. She says that all real change is basically an act of heresy against the way things are now. So get this, heresy isn't about tearing things down. It's an act of faith. It's a hopeful, totally necessary step if we actually want to build a better world.
Okay, so who was this woman, Jane Harrison? I mean, she was so far ahead of her time. Let's start with her, because she was a genuine intellectual trailblazer.
Yeah, she was no slouch. She ran in some seriously brilliant circles. In fact, her friend Virginia Woolf, yes, that Virginia Woolf, put it perfectly. She was just captivated by Harrison's superb, high-thinking, agnostic ways. I love that phrase. It just means she had this incredible mind that was super sharp, super intellectual, but also deeply skeptical of any kind of dogma. And people, I mean the heavy hitters of her day, really admired her for it.
And this is where it gets really interesting. She called herself a deeply religious atheist. Now that might sound like a total contradiction, right? But for her, it made perfect sense. She completely rejected all the dogma and theology, but she was absolutely fascinated by the impulse behind it all. You know, that deep, powerful human need for connection and for meaning. And because of this perspective, she could study religion not as a true believer, but almost like a scientist studying a subject. It became a window for her, a way to look right into the human soul.
All right, so from that unique perspective, let's dig into one of her big ideas about how society works. And it all comes down to this fundamental tension, this friction really, between the young and the old. And for her, this wasn't a bug, it was a feature.
And believe it or not, this whole rabbit hole started with a single, pretty blunt comment. A young colleague of hers at Cambridge just flat out said, "No one over 30 is worth speaking to." Huh. I mean, classic youthful rebellion, right? It was totally designed to get a rise out of people.
But Harrison's reaction? This is what makes her so brilliant. She didn't get offended, she didn't get angry, she got curious. She heard that and didn't see an insult. She saw data. She called it a good solid prejudice, meaning it was probably rooted in some kind of real-life experience. She wanted to know, what's the truth behind that attitude? What does it tell us about how young people and old people see the world differently?
And this curiosity led her to this really fascinating breakdown. She basically saw youth and what she called crabbed age as these two totally different but equally essential poles of human life. So on one side, you've got youth. That's the time for big ideas, for rationalism, for intellect. And yeah, for a certain kind of egotism that's actually necessary while you're figuring out who you are. But then you have age, and that, she said, is driven more by instinct, by tradition, and by a kind of altruism that life just forces on you. It's like one is rehearsing for life, and the other is just busy living it.
So what's this masquerade thing all about? Well, for Harrison, being young is kind of like being in a play. She saw young people as a chorus, where every single person thinks they're the main character. You know, you try on different personalities, different masks, to see what fits, to make yourself feel bigger. And you can do that because you haven't been humbled yet by life's big responsibilities. You know, a mortgage, a career, a family. It's those things, she argued, that eventually force you to specialize, to cooperate. Life itself makes you shift from a world that's all about me to a world that has to be about us.
Okay, so this tension between the young individual and the traditional older generation, it builds and builds to what is maybe her most powerful idea. I mean, if tradition and instinct are the territory of crabbed age, then how does society ever move forward? How do we ever progress? For Jane Harrison, the answer was one powerful word: heresy.
And we have to be super clear about what she meant by heresy. She goes right back to the word's origin. In Greek, heresy means to choose. So this is the key. Heresy isn't just disagreeing for the sake of it. It's the act of making a personal, passionate, conscious choice about what you believe. It's the exact opposite of just
passively accepting what your family or your society hands down to you. It's about taking ownership of your own thought. And for her, living through a time of just massive, rapid change, this wasn't some nice-to-have intellectual exercise. No, she saw it as a human obligation, a duty. She believed that just blindly accepting tradition was actually dangerous. It was a force holding all of humanity back. So for her, actively choosing your beliefs, well, that became a moral imperative.
And this is the choice she lays out for us. She saw two basic ways a society can function. The first she called the homogeneous herd. Think of it like a flock of sheep. Everyone's the same, and unity comes from that similarity, from what she calls herd suggestion, basically peer pressure. The individual gets squashed. But then there's the other option, the organic society. And this is the one that heresy makes possible. Here, the unity comes from cooperation between different people. It's driven by science and free thought, and it's the only way the true authentic individual can actually emerge.
Okay, so let's say we do it. We embrace heresy, we break free from the herd, but then what? What replaces that feeling of belonging you get from being part of the pack? Well, Harrison had an answer for that too. She saw a new kind of secular faith emerging, a sort of religion based purely on human connection. She called it Unanimism.
The idea is actually pretty simple, but it's also really profound. Unionism is this belief that when two or three people, or more, are gathered together and truly connect, something new is created. A kind of collective spirit or a shared consciousness emerges. So we're not talking about some god up in the sky. We're talking about the very real, very powerful energy that gets created between us when we come together with a common purpose or just a feeling of sympathy.
And the whole goal of this unanimism is to achieve what she calls unselfing. It's about shifting your focus from the inside to the outside. It's a huge shift away from that me perspective of youth we talked about, and even away from the stubborn my way is the right way dogma of tradition. It's all about focusing on the shared life of the community instead. She even broke down the psychology of what happens during a religious conversion. But again, she stripped away all the supernatural stuff and saw it as this universal human process. It goes like this. First, there's a crisis. Your world falls apart. Your ego gets shattered. Then, out of nowhere, comes this incredible, sudden feeling of peace and oneness with everything. And what's the result? The individual self gets socialized. It's submerged into the group, into something bigger. You literally go from thinking in terms of I to thinking in terms of we.
And remember, she's writing this while the First World War is raging. So for her, this wasn't just some nice philosophical idea. It was a matter of survival. She saw the old system, one built on repression, vengeance, and division, and saw it leading to absolute disaster. The only path forward, she pleaded, was to take a huge step out of what she called the prison of self, and finally embrace the fact that we all depend on each other.
So yeah, these are some pretty mind-blowing ideas for 1915, right? But what makes them truly powerful, what gives me chills, is how perfectly she seems to be speaking directly to our world, right here, right now.
This is where it all clicks into place. Maria Popova, in that foreword again, draws a direct line from Harrison's herd suggestion to what she calls the herd righteousness of social media. Harrison saw over 100 years ago that human need to feel right, together, can turn toxic in a heartbeat. It makes us look for a common enemy, a designated other, so we can break our fingers on their faults, as Popova says. I mean, does that sound familiar? It's a perfect, chilling description of online outrage and cancel culture.
So what's the way out? What was Harrison's solution? Well, it wasn't more dogma or having better arguments or winning the debate. For her, the path to saving ourselves as people and as a society was incredibly simple. By contacts, we are saved. That's it. Real salvation, real progress, comes from genuine, sympathetic connections between actual human beings, not from hiding in our self-righteous herds online.
And that leaves us with a huge, vital question for today, for right now. If Jane Harrison is right, if our only way forward is through real connection, then what does it actually mean to be a heretic in our world? In a world that pushes us, every single day, to pick a side, join a herd, and just shout down everyone else, maybe the most rebellious, the most heretical act you can possibly commit is to choose understanding instead of outrage, to choose connection over condemnation. What do you think?